G'day all. This is a quick video about science and technology, but I thought while I'm on the topic, I might share an interesting little piece of technology that I just identified just now. So my shirt is for local epic power folk metal band Valhalla. If epic power folk metal is something that you might be into, they'd be well worth checking out. They gig around here now and then, and they're a lot of fun. The t-shirt actually is black with white writing and green pattern on it. But because I'm standing in front of a green screen and the green screen has been replaced with the red background, the green on my shirt has been replaced with the red background also. So that's basically why it looks like it's actually a red shirt when it's actually a green shirt. The other thing I guess to notice is that as I described in a couple of earlier videos, I lost a bunch of videos for technical reasons and had to reshoot a bunch and ended up only having the one shirt. So you can actually chronologically figure out the age of a video or when it was done by the shirt. However, it will change and it will look like I have a number of different Valhalla shirts because of the different backgrounds. So anyway, that's, I hope, an interesting kind of side note on technology. Technology, the word scientia, it comes from the Greek word for knowledge. Science comes from scientia, sorry. The word technology comes from techne, the Greek word for making. So logos, as in psychology, logos means writing about or works around, words about, I guess, technically. So technology is words about making stuff. That's basically what it boils down to. So technology is about making things, but the things needn't necessarily be physical. So the internet, for example, is a technology, but you could, unless you've watched the IT Crowd and you find the internet in a box, the internet is a network of protocols and systems that allows information to be communicated. So there's not a thing made, but there's a set of rules basically, and then physical systems to carry information. So technology basically is usually about making things better for our lives in some way, or at least doing things that we desire to happen. Science and technology, often people do think of, science discovers new knowledge and then technology builds a thing based on that new knowledge. And sometimes that happens, but quite often the reverse is also true. That one of my personal favorite technologies is brewing. The ancient Egyptians, 2,000 and 3,000 BC, so almost 5,000 years ago now, while building the pyramids, were feeding their slaves a form of beer because it basically is a relatively cheap and easy nutrient to give to people who are doing hard physical work. So brewing, the ability to make beer and cider and ales and various things, is a technology that was known for thousands of years. It's only in the last couple of hundred years that we understand that yeast is a very small organism that consumes sugar and excretes alcohol and carbon dioxide, therefore making the beer fizzy. So that's a technology that vastly preceded the science. The making of steel, for example, comes from the end of the Iron Age, moving forward into the Steel Age. And people discovered that if you include some carbon and work the iron, it becomes much tougher, much less brittle, much easier to put a sharp edge on, and much less likely for your sword to snap the first time it hits another sword. And again, we knew about that technology much before we knew about the technology of the carbon being incorporated with the metal atoms, the iron metal atoms, in ways that make it firmer in material science, and so on. So there's a number of examples of technology leading science and vice versa. Some of the science that Einstein came up with in 1905 and 1915, we couldn't really confirm experimentally because we didn't have the technology until the 50s and 60s. So 30 or 40 years later, it became possible to have atomic clocks and things, atomic clocks and high-flying aeroplanes, and you could test special relativity and discover that in fact time does change when you fly very fast. So that's kind of, it's a dynamic relationship. In the Australian curriculum, which is the junior secondary one, ICT capability is one of the general capabilities. So across all subjects and in science inquiry skills, that's what happens in junior secondary. In senior, basically, technology doesn't get much of an emphasis really. It's mentioned, there's a small section, but it's about the information technologies that you use for learning and teaching. It's not about teaching about technology itself, but it's one of the things that we do actually need to be able to do. Yeah, there's a piece on language, there's a piece on quantitative, piece on equity, but not really a piece on technology in the senior science syllabuses. Doesn't mean we can ignore it though. It's kind of implicit in the content in the syllabuses and certainly in the skills. So the inquiry skills that students need to learn these days involve a lot of information technologies. But I think the other thing is technology isn't just information technology. So blackboard and chalk is a technology. Carving things on a stone tablet is a technology. Technology is just stuff that's made for human purposes. My glasses are not Google Glass smart glasses, they're just glasses, but they're a technology and a very important one, and so on. So often when we talk about technology in school, it gets reduced to being ICTs, and I think that's unfortunate because it helps us, it weakens our understanding of what technology is really about. And there are heaps of things that improve our lives. There is arguably things that make our lives worse as well. So nano beads of plastics that were used in a whole variety of products were a technology. They were discovered, they had particular uses and affordances, and then we discovered that they were throughout the environment, and every fish you eat has some in them, and apparently we consume about a credit card a month worth of plastics just in the stuff we eat from our environment because it's so pervasive in the environment. We don't retain that, we excrete it, but plastic obviously is not something we necessarily want in our diet. So technologies do actually enhance life, but they have their downsides and their costs and benefits and so on. So, you know, the gasoline internal combustion engine is a fantastic technology. It's taken us all around the world, but it has the costs of climate change and so on. Technology is a different thing from science. So in science, you make a knowledge claim, you support it with evidence, you make an argument, and you have experimental evidence to support it. That's not what happens in technology. So in technology, you don't make a knowledge claim, you make a product effectively, or you design a product and people can work from the design. And the kind of standards to judge it are these kinds of things. So is it effective? Does it work at all? Because there's not much of a product if it doesn't actually solve the problem it's meant to solve. So is it effective? And then is it efficient? Does it do that with fewer resources than the alternatives? Is it cheaper or less time consuming or a whole variety of other things? Efficiency is how many resources do you need to achieve your outcome? Is it aesthetically pleasing? Do people like it? Now, aesthetically pleasing mightn't mean conventionally beautiful. Somebody might like something that somebody else finds really hideous. I personally am a sports bike guy, as you'll see in a couple of minutes, whereas people who are cruiser guys who like a Harley, they think my bike is really ugly, I think their bike is really ugly, but it's aesthetically pleasing to the audience that it's intended to appeal to. What are the features? So do you want everything that opens and shuts and all bells and whistles, or do you want a really simple, bare bones, plain thing? And there are obviously costs and benefits to both of those things. So it comes down to what the particular audience actually wants. And then I've said adaptation there, but optimization is probably a better word. So how do we optimize it for a particular use, because given that there's no one perfect solution. So let me give an example of that. Here is the Bugatti Veyron. It's well over $1 million in Australia. The tires are each $20,000 and you can't change them yourself. You have to take it back to the dealership to get a tire changed. It is incredibly fast. It has 1,000 horsepower. It will hit 400 kilometers an hour. But if you're doing 400 kilometers an hour or on the way, you will completely empty the fuel tank in 10 minutes. It's got a decent sized fuel tank, but a V10 engine working at those kind of powers just chews through the fuel at an incredible rate. So it's a great solution to the problem of A, posing, but B, going very fast. It's not a great solution to everyday life. Just apart from anything else, you don't want people running shopping trolleys into it at the shopping centre car park. It probably is terrible at going over speed humps because it's very low. It's got ground effect stuff underneath it to enable it to be stable at 400 kilometers an hour, and so on. So it's not optimum. It's not the perfect car. And you could argue about which sports car is the bestest sports car on the criteria that we judge sports cars on. But certainly the Veyron is an amazing human achievement. Lots of carbon fiber, lots of technologies that we've developed for aerospace and turned to this use and so on. Here is another excellent vehicle. This is a Nissan Tida in the champagne gold color. It's not actually ours because that's not our rego, but it's a photo that I found of one online. And it's the kind of car that I drive and have driven since 2007 when I bought it new. It's done about a bit over 300,000 kilometers. A tank of fuel will take you for 3 or 4 hours, not for 10 minutes. It's very unexciting to drive, certainly much more so than the Veyron, but probably much more so than just about anything on the road. It's a shopping trolley on wheels, but it does the job. It keeps us out of the rain when it's too rainy, and it gets the groceries home from the shop. And those are the main things that I want from it. My wife Sue drives it a lot, and she has a lot of materials and flyers and banners and things for her business that she lugs around in it. It will take my golf clubs to the course and do various other activities like that. And that's what it's for. And it's a reasonably optimized solution for that, given the cost. It didn't cost over $1 million, and the tires aren't worth over $20,000. In fact, the whole car is definitely not worth over $20,000. So, but it's a solution for a different set of problems to what the Bugatti Veyron is. But this is my favorite problem solution, which is the bike. That's me in the front, in the middle, with number 10. I ride a Kawasaki Ninja 1000. It's a sports touring motorbike. That's me at a track day at Queensland Raceway, racing some other guys who, it looks as though I'm beating them, but I think they're coming up to pass me at that point. But, if my solution, it uses even less fuel than the Nissan Tida. Its tires are more expensive, but there are fewer tires to pay for. It goes a lot faster than the Tida and probably goes awfully close to out-accelerating the Veyron over a short distance. And it's a hell of a lot of fun. And most weekend mornings, you can find me up in the Gold Coast hinterland through the twisty roads having a hell of a lot of fun. So that's my particular problem solution to the problem of A, getting from A to B, and B, having a lot of fun. It's also fantastic if you are a person who works at a university and wants to be able to park close and free. University parking is always a massive pain, and particularly for me, I often have to travel between different university campuses in the middle of the day, and finding a park and then change for the meter and all of the messing about is just about impossible. Whereas on the bike, I pull up real close and it doesn't cost me anything and it's really nice. So it solves particular problems. The problem of when it's a thunderstorm, it solves less well. It solves certain problems less well, including the problem of protecting me from other drivers on the road, but it solves other problems really well. So optimization, adaptation, fitness for purpose is a criterion for judging technological problem solutions. Some of the stuff that you got in the 1900s, the 1890s and so on, was amazing. It was beautifully constructed. It was brass and ebony and ivory and mahogany and all of these beautiful materials. It was designed to last 100 years. Just amazing stuff, material objects. And you kind of think, oh, should we go back to that kind of environment rather than the very disposable, kind of intentionally obsolete materials that are designed to be replaced every year or two, like our current phones and so on. So we've gained power. Certainly, the phone in my pocket is vastly more powerful than the computer that was used to send humans to the moon. So we've gained something, but we've lost something in terms of the style and the ability. But the other thing is, those amazing brass and ebony and mahogany objects were for the very rich. They weren't for the people working in the factories and so on. So they were for a very few, very privileged people. Whereas probably most people listening to me have a modern smartphone of some kind. It mightn't be the latest iPhone X or XR or whatever it is, or there's probably a newer one that by the time you see this. But it's something that, again, the average person even 10 years ago couldn't have imagined having that much power to communicate and compute in their pocket. So we've gained some things and we've lost some things in technology, and that's the same with kind of everything. There's always trade-offs that you make, and you decide on the kind of trade-offs that you want, but not everybody has free choice because people have different levels of resources. So, you know, if I was a person somewhere in outer Mongolia, I probably wouldn't have the same options in terms of technologies and so on. So figuring out the best balances for particular solutions and figuring out ways to use resources sensibly and helpfully. Talked about planned obsolescence, the fact that phones don't last very long, computers maybe slightly longer, but they do sort of turn over and they're kind of obsolete and they stop being supported after a few years. Things like most of our razors are disposable now rather than sharpened and reused and so on. Things are kind of designed to require us to throw them away and get the new one, which causes then A, cost, and B, lots of waste. So landfills and all sorts of the problems with the disposal of waste. So can we perhaps do something a bit greener with that? Can we be a bit more sustainable? Can we reduce, reuse, recycle? So reduce, use less of the stuff in the first place. Reuse, don't chuck it out, figure out a way to use it multiple times. And obviously there's design things that can improve and help that. Recycle, if you can't reuse the aluminium drink can, then send it back for recycling, which we're trying to do. We've now added a container deposit scheme in Queensland. And think about the energy. So to recycle aluminium from aluminium to aluminium, you melt it down and recast it. But to make aluminium initially from bauxite, the aluminium ore, you smelt it using vast amounts of electricity and therefore vast amounts of energy. So if you recycle, you actually are saving a lot of energy and hence, at the moment at least, a lot of greenhouse gases. As we start using renewables for those things, including aluminium smelting, that picture will change a bit, but there are other environmental costs of smelting as well. So reducing, reusing and recycling is definitely helping to build sustainability, and sustainability is one of those things that we want to make implicit in our teaching. So that's a little on technology and thinking about how we embed it. I did talk about the curricular emphases model way back, I think week one even maybe. Curricular emphases, the idea that you can have a technology emphasis in your teaching and explore these technological issues around the science that you're actually dealing with. So, you know, if you're working on electricity, it can be around electricity generation and transmission. If you're working on river ecosystems, it can be about the various pollutants and what happens when you get a lot of fertilizer runoff from farms into rivers and so on. So all of those kind of connections between the science, the relevant science and the relevant technology.